Hello, welcome to the second unit, crystal defects and deformation of metals. Generally, in our crystal, the atoms or you can say molecules, they're all arranged in a regular pattern in a three-dimensional network. In an ideal crystal, this arrangement is regular and perfect throughout the crystal. Such a crystal may be called as an ideal crystal. An ideal crystal is a perfect crystal in all respects. However, when the metal crystallizes from molten metal to solid state, they never be perfect. They have a little distortion and various imperfections or defects in the crystal. Due to the presence of imperfections in the crystals, the mechanical, electrical and magnetic properties of the crystalline solids are very much affected. The purpose of study of imperfections in crystals have main reasons. The first reason is it provides a good understanding of crystals and how they affect the properties of the material. So if you know this nature and presence of crystal, defects in a crystal, we can estimate the properties of the material and we can understand how these defects going to affect the properties of the material. And defects also helps in finding the possibilities of reducing or removing these defects. So in a crystals we can find four possibilities of defects. One is the point defects, a line or you can say linear defects, and the third one is the surface defects, and the fourth one is volume defects. We'll discuss what is this point defects actually. So point defects or you can say imperfections takes place due to imperfect packing of atoms during crystallization. The point defects also takes place due to vibrations of atoms at high temperature. So this is the reasons for the point defects. So point defects are due to imperfect packing of atoms during the crystallization. And this point defects may also arise due to vibrations of atoms at high temperatures. There are three types of point defects. First one is a stoichiometric defect, and the second one is a Frankel defect, and the third one is Coty defect. First let us see what is this stoichiometric defect. So in this kind of it is a kind of point defect. The ratio of positive and negative ions, that is the stoichiometric and electrical neutrality of a solid, is not disturbed. Sometimes it is also known as intrinsic or thermodynamic defect. See, in this stoichiometric defect, that electrical neutrality of the solid is not going to be disturbed, right? At the ratio of positive ions and negative ions is constant. Basically, there are two types of stoichiometric defects. One is vacancy defects, another one is interstitial defect. What is this vacancy defect? A vacancy in a lattice, vacancy is a lattice position that is vacant because the atom is missing. It is created when the solid is formed. There are other ways of making a vacancy, but there also occurs naturally as a result of thermal vibrations. So in a crystal lattice, from the figure you can understand. So it is a crystal lattice. So there you can find certain vacancies. Actually in a crystal lattice, so atoms, they have to occupy their own sites, but in this at some places in the crystal lattice, the atoms are missing. So this missing of atoms may be because of this thermal vibrations, or this defect is caused due to this defects happening during the process of crystallization, that is the transition from liquid to solid state. In this vacancy defect, you can find in certain sites of this crystal lattice there are vacancy of atoms. That's why this defect is called vacancy defect. And next is and this vacancy defect actually it is going to decrease the density of the material. The adverse effect of this vacancy defect on the properties of the material is it is going to decrease the density of the material. So next is the interstitial defect. So when some constituent particles or atoms or molecules occupy an interstitial site, the crystal is said to have interstitial defect. See, this is the crystal lattice. So there are atoms having their perfect positions, but some extra atoms, they are going to settle the interstitial gaps, right? Wherever there is a space between the atoms, one extra atom going to be settled there. So this type of defect, what we can say is interstitial defect. This interstitial defect is going to increase the density of the substance, or it is going to increase the density of the material, right? And this vacancy defect, interstitial defects, so they comes under vacancy defect. So next is a Frankel defect. So actually Frankel defect is a uh, combination of vacancy defect as well as interstitial defect. So what is going to happen here, um, generally in a perfect crystal lattice, so all the atoms are arranged in a regular pattern in their perfect sites, but because of the defect in the crystal and vacancy, a atom, it is going to create a vacancy in its own sites, and this vacated atom, it is going to find the interstitial gap, it is going to settle there. So that's why this defect is called Frankel defect. Actually Frankel defect is a combination of vacancy defect as well as crystal defect. That vacated atom, it is going to find the interstitial gap. That vacated atom going to find the, it is going to settle in the interstitial gap. That's why this Frankel defect is a combination of vacancy defect as well as interstitial defect. Next is the spotty defect. What is the spotty defect? See, these imperfections are similar to vacancy defect. This defect is caused whenever a pair of positive ions and negative ions are missing from a crystal as shown in the figure. This type of imperfection maintains the charge neutrality. So you can see this diagram, it is a self-explanatory one. So here we have a combination of anions as well as the cations, but here a pair of anions as well as cations are missing, right? Here a pair of ions are missing. So that's why in this spotty defect that electrical neutrality is maintained. Electrical neutrality is maintained. Why? Because a pair of anions as well as cations are missing, right? The electrical neutrality is unaffected in this kind of spotty defect, and it is just similar to vacancy defect. So once again I am repeating, generally in a crystal lattice, so all the molecules, or you can say atoms, they are all arranged in a perfect uh, positions in a three-dimensional network, and if they have their perfect positions, we can say it is an ideal crystal, right? Or you can say perfect crystal. But during this crystallization process, or because of some thermal vibrations, some imperfections, or you can say defects, are going to happen in a crystal. So due to the presence of imperfections or defects in the crystal, the mechanical, electrical and the magnetic properties of the crystalline solids are very much affected. So if you know, if we know these imperfections in a crystal, uh, we can estimate the properties of the materials, and if you have a knowledge of defects in the crystal, and we can find the means in reducing or removing the defects in the crystal. So we have four kinds of defects in the crystal: point defects, line or linear defects, surface defects, and volume defects. So point defects, or you can say imperfections, this defects is happening due to imperfect packing of atoms. so during the process of crystallization. And the point defects may also take place due to vibrations of atoms at high temperatures. And here we can find the three types of point defects. One is a stoichiometric defect, and the second one a Frankel defect, and the third one Scotty defect. In this kind of stoichiometric defect, the ratio of positive and negative ions, that is quadrametric, and electrical neutrality of the solid is not disturbed. Sometimes it is also known as the intrinsic or thermodynamic defect. And under this heading of stoichiometric defect, we have two kinds of defects. One is a vacancy defect, and the second one is the interstitial defect. So in this vacancy defect, so in a crystal lattice, at some positions, we can find some atoms are missing in its regular sites. Some atoms are missing in their regular sites. We can find some vacant positions in the crystal lattice. This kind of defect, what we can say, is vacancy defect. The vacancy defect may also occur naturally, or it may be due to thermal vibrations. So because of the presence of vacancy defect, density of the material decreases. And the second type of defects under the heading of a point defect is interstitial defect. So in this interstitial defect, one extra atom, it will find the interstitial gap and it is going to settle there in the regular crystal lattice, right? So because of this interstitial, because of the presence of extra atom in the interstitial sites, it is going to disturb the lattice structure, and we can refer this as a defect. So because of the presence of extra atom in the crystal lattice, the adverse effect of this defect on the property of the material is the density of the substance increases. The density of the substance increases. So because of this presence of extra atom in the regular crystal lattice. And the third one is a Frankel defect. A Frankel defect is a combination of vacancy defect as well as interstitial defect. Generally in a regular crystal lattice, atom, it is going to create a vacant space at one side, and this vacated atom, it is going to find the interstitial gap and it is going to settle there. That's why this kind of defect, what we can say, is a Frankel defect. So it comes under this point defect only. And next kind of defect is the Scotty defect. So Scotty defect, it is just similar to vacancy defect, but this defect is caused whenever a pair of positive ions and negative ions are missing. Positive ions and negative ions are missing, and because of this missing of a pair of positive and negative ions, that electrical neutrality of the material is maintained. Electrical neutrality of the material is maintained. So you can understand with the help of this diagram. So this the red color circles, what we can say, they are the cations, and this blue color, they are the anion. So from this regular crystal lattice, this pair of atoms are missing. That's why this type of defect, what we can say, is Scotty defect, right? So in the next lecture, we can discuss about linear defects, or we can say line defects. Okay, that will be discussed in the next classes. So thank you very much.